Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
I never understood that you gotta learn to swim. You're gonna drown. People think I'm riding high, but I feel so low. I try to be a good man. Life keeps beating me down.
Welcome to the Stadium Pulse, ladies and gentlemen. Something weird is going to happen this weekend. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know who is going to get got or who's going to be the big upset this weekend, but somebody is going to get surprised. It's one of those weekends in college football where everyone tells you, well, there's not really much going on. Yeah, we have Texas A&M, LSU. You got College Game Day going to Missouri and Vanderbilt. There's some good games on, but there's nothing high caliber. There's nothing that we can definitively say is an elite slate of college football, kind of like how we had Georgia and Alabama, Oregon and Penn State, the whiteout. You know what I mean. But it's these types of weekends that you end up looking back upon and say, what happened? Maybe it's a South Carolina pulling off an incredible upset against Alabama. Maybe it's LSU coming back to life like The Undertaker. Maybe it's even crazier. We're talking UCLA continuing their undefeated streak since Coach Skipper came into town and the big renaissance of UCLA football. They play Indiana, the number 2 team in the country. There's a lot of different things that can happen this week. But that's not to say there isn't good football to be played, at least on paper. And so what we're going to do today, this is the Stadium Pulse. It's a college football show. We only talk about college football around here. And there's a big red button that can get you some more college football content. We're here every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And the best way for us to pop up back onto your feed is clicking that red button. A like, a comment, a share, that's all super appreciated. They're all valuable. But I want to talk some more ball with you. Blame me, sue me, whatever it may be. We're going to talk a little bit about Ole Miss, Oklahoma. We're going to talk about Illinois, Washington, and what I think is going to be the most underrated game of the weekend. We're going to talk Mizzou and Vanderbilt. We'll talk national championship predictions. And we'll talk a little bit about College Game Day. The bright side, at least, of not having a major slate is going into the weekend. We can kind of pick and choose our battles, dive into some new topics. The past couple of weekends have been just loaded. So it's been kind of difficult throughout the week to not just talk about game previews. We only have about 30, 40 minutes here to talk. So I'm happy to be able to talk about some things that are talking about the broader scope of college football. But no better way than to dive on in. Need a water break. Make the editor's life a little bit easier with an in break. Ole Miss versus Oklahoma. Number 8 versus number 13. 11 o'clock, Norman, Oklahoma. Both teams are 6-1. Is this a playoff elimination game? That's the first question I have. Not to say that Oklahoma, if they were to lose this game, they're out of the playoffs guaranteed. Same could be said for Ole Miss. Because the difference between Ole Miss last year and this year is more rooted into the fact that they didn't have an egregious loss at the time. Sure, they ended up losing to Florida, but they are not walking a tightrope going into this game. And even following it, yeah, they'll have a tightrope, but they still have everything in front of them, and maybe they get a couple things to break their way. The winner of this game, the true prize between these two programs, is controlling your destiny. The winner of this game will be 7-1 going into the home stretch of the college football season. And for Oklahoma, for the most part, it is going to be a murder's row schedule to finish the year. And for Ole Miss, you can basically sign, seal, deliver, I'm yours. They're a college football playoff team if they were to win this football game, especially following going on the road to Athens, taking your first loss of the season, and to be able to bounce back and play in Norman, Oklahoma and win this game, that would be quite impressive. But to talk about the actual matchup here and what are we looking for? Because everyone's going to point to, and rightfully so, a great coaching matchup between Lane Kiffin and Brent Venables. An offensive mind versus a defensive mind. And that's completely understandable. And that is going to be cinema. That's what everyone's going to want to see. My question actually goes to the offensive side for Oklahoma and Ben Arbuckle. What we saw last week with South Carolina and Oklahoma, if you did not watch the game, frankly, I don't blame you. Outside of potentially a wager or maybe wanting to see if South Carolina pulls off their big time upset, because we all agreed that Oklahoma, with a banged up John Mateer and their offensive identity, that there was the threads of a potential upset there, but didn't really come to fruition. South Carolina seems a little bit dead in the water at the moment. With Oklahoma, they uncovered something that they didn't really have in previous weeks. And especially with some of the injuries that John Mateer and this program has been dealing with, the rushing attack has not really been there. If you were to bring an alien from the sky and ask him, you know, what is Oklahoma's identity? And he watches the first half of the season, he would say it's very John Mateer centric. He would say they really got to rely on this quarterback. They got, in an alien language, this quarterback, if he's having an off night, what way can they put up points? And we kind of saw that against Texas, a very good defense at that point. But at the end of the day, John Mateer was like, what, 60% himself? But Oklahoma doesn't have another way of putting up points. Well, with, I believe, Torrey Blaylock and this rushing attack, even with Mateer not fully unlocking that rushing ability that we've seen early into the season, that is something to make a major note of, because you're about to go play Ole Miss. You're going to be back at home against the 99th, if I'm remembering correct, rushing defense. So it's not as if Ole Miss is going to present a major challenge. If anything, this is just going to be a test of, is that a one night? Is that an off night where all of a sudden you randomly break off for a bunch of rushing yards and you find a way to win in that stadium at South Carolina? Or is that something that you've unlocked? Have you not played your best football yet? And have you found something by running the football? Because I think that is going to be the key area when talking about the matchup against Ole Miss. If you remember, Ole Miss 250 rushing yards were held against them against Georgia in 38 minutes of time of possession. Those two ingredients are great ingredients if you're the home team. It's a great ingredient to win a football game, but especially when you're at home, you squeeze the game. And not only that, for Ole Miss, you faced a defense that for 3 quarters every single game in Georgia is not a good defense. You're facing a better defense right now with Oklahoma. So not only are you going to face an offense that probably has a more dynamic quarterback, who John Mateer, I'm sure his timeline, if he keeps playing every single week, probably prolongs the healing process. But at the end of the day, more than likely every week it's getting a little bit better. An offense that just figured out a potential thread that can win a game in their rushing attack. Now it's to be seen if it can happen every single week, and maybe that was just a one-night stand situation. But I want to see if it turns and blossoms into a relationship, and that maybe could be something that they could rely on later into the season, because I think that's going to be the difference between Oklahoma, the college football playoff team, and Oklahoma, the team that made a very good 9-3 bowl. I don't love Ole Miss in this spot. I've been very Oklahoma-centric in this spot, and that's because I think Oklahoma wins this game, and I think they cover. Ole Miss is in a very difficult position. Trinidad Chambly reported to start. Completely understand that. Trinidad Chambly steps up to the plate every single time. And he is a veteran quarterback, not in terms of SEC play, just in seeing a lot of college football. And there's quarterbacks that see a lot of college football, even at the SEC level, even at the highest level of football, regardless of the conference, and looks like a freshman shaking his hands, if you remember that Oklahoma State kid, against a guy like Brent Venables. And I think being at home, back-to-back road stretch, second leg, against an offense that is figuring something new out against a very good defense, I just see so many more paths for Oklahoma to win this game than I do versus an Ole Miss team coming off of a loss, bouncing back, and just absolutely torching a Venables defense at home. I thought Ole Miss was a little bit overrated when they were all the way at 5. I think they're still a little overrated at 8. And I think we're kind of course correcting. And you have one team that played their best football early into the year, may have peaked a little bit early in Ole Miss. And Oklahoma, who I thought could be in the same boat and played their best football too early. But that South Carolina game gave me a little bit more hope that maybe it's still to be seen if Oklahoma has their best game yet. So I think Oklahoma is going to win. I think they cover. Number 23, Illinois, travels to Washington following their bye. We have two programs, both at 5 and 2. And these are two programs that are kind of sitting in the bubble area of the college football playoff with 2 losses, very talented teams that have the potential to backdoor their way into a college football playoff spot. 10 and 2 for the Big Ten, that gets you in. For Illinois, your 2 losses are what? Indiana, Ohio State, number 1 and number 2. Got to feel good about that. Not to mention Washington. Your losses are Ohio State and then last week against Michigan. And so this is a very interesting dynamic between 2 Big Ten teams that I think should be top 25. Obviously, Illinois is in the top 25, but I think Washington has earned it, even though they lost to Michigan the previous week. I think this is a very underrated matchup between a veteran roster, a veteran program in Illinois with a lot of experience, coming off of a bye, getting a little bit more healthy, going against Washington, a young team, DeMond Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston. That's a dynamic trio to have on the offensive side of the ball. Statistically, their defense is playing exceptional football with a fantastic head coach in Jed Fish. I am a Jed Fish believer through and through. And so you're playing with the dynamics of, do you want to trust and put your money on the team that is the veteran roster? Luke Altmaier just finds ways to win. That's getting a little bit more healthy, that's coming off of a bye, but they're going on the road to one of the more difficult places to play in the entire country, let alone the West Coast, at Washington? Or do you want to trust the young team to bounce back after a loss, coming back home with a dynamic quarterback, a dynamic wide receiver? That's the stage that we're dealing with. That is the playing field that we're looking at. So what do I think is going to happen? I like Washington here, man. I like Washington against Illinois. Traditionally, would I usually go with the team that is the veteran roster coming off of a bye? Some of those scheduling dynamics work in their favor. I would. But we've seen multiple times this season with Illinois, and as unfortunate as it is, they did deal an injury to their star corner. I think he's out for the season, so I apologize if I'm incorrect on that. But we've seen multiple times this year, and it's not just one corner. It is the unit of that secondary is just not good against higher-end talent. Carnell Tate shredded them. Jeremiah Smith shredded them. It may not look like it on the statistical stat line because Ohio State can beat you with like barely putting up 250 yards, but it looks like domination for 4 quarters. Go look at Makai Lemon. Makai Lemon torched them. These top-end wide receivers find a ton of success. Now, I'm not saying one guy's going to win the game. Just because I like Denzel Boston doesn't mean I'm picking Washington. The reason why I'm picking Washington is they are one of the better third down teams on the offensive side of the ball in the country. One of the worst defenses in terms of third down conversions is Illinois. You pair that with a wide receiver that could convert those 3rd and 8s, those 3rd and 11s if you end up getting behind the sticks. That's a formula at home that I can work with. Now, if you're someone that wants to believe in Illinois, they are getting their lead rusher back. But statistically, Washington's defense has been very good against the run. That's something you're going to need to flip if you want to pull off the road upset. And I didn't just forget that Washington at home has been a freight train outside of Ohio State, and that's the number one team in the country. Washington has been a wagon at home. I didn't just forget that. That didn't just Men in Black, you forget. No, that is still something to be aware about. And I think there's a lot of different things that work in Washington's favor. And if the one hesitation that I have about them is maybe their physicality and their youth, I think this is a maturity test for them. And I think they're going to pass it with flying colors. And if I have to pick between these two programs, I'm picking Washington to win. And that's going to be my prediction. All right, let's get to game of the week. And we'll talk about how College Game Day chose this one. But, pardon me. Game of the week is going to be Missouri at Vanderbilt. The number 15 team versus the number 10 team in the country. 2:30, at least 2:30 Central. This is a very interesting matchup. Pardon me. Oh my gosh. Let's just even take a beat on that. I think this game, with it being the game of the week, I can't be coughing throughout it, guys. Let's, editor, wherever you may be, we're starting it now. Game of the week, number 15, Missouri. Eli Drinkowitz, is he going to be the head coach at Missouri? Traveling to Nashville, Vegas, baby. Tennessee to face off against the number 10 Vanderbilt Commodores. First time, and how long have they been a top 10 team? Maybe since World War II. We have a 2:30 Central kickoff. I have a lot of thoughts on this game. Of course I do. I have a lot of thoughts on many games, but this is a battle between Ahmad Hardy and Diego Pavia. Ahmad Hardy is the heart and soul of that Missouri team in terms of their offensive side of their production. And he's had a couple down games. What was his line? 84.5. This was a guy that for first 4 or 5 weeks surpassed 100 yards every single time. And it's kind of stalled out. Now you're facing against a top 15 defense against Vanderbilt. But if that's the headline, you would think, well, how else is Missouri going to put up points if they're going to run into this great rushing defense? Well, to be honest, statistically, if you were to go look at that in a vacuum of the top 15 rushing defense, then you go look at the schedule and you say, well, where's the good rushing team? Are they not good running the football because they're running into Vanderbilt, or are they just not facing teams that run the ball? Alabama is not a good rushing threat right now. Just outright, they're not. So you can't really take that as a litmus test to the Vanderbilt rushing defense. LSU cannot run the ball. That is not a true test. A true test is Bo Perbula and Ahmad Hardy and this physical offensive line that Missouri has. I said it on TikTok. I was like, this offensive line and defensive line combo on both sides of the ball, the Vanderbilt defensive line versus the Mizzou offensive line, and vice versa, Vanderbilt's offensive line versus Mizzou's defensive line, is fascinating. It's going to be cinema. If you are a true film guy or you're interested in that area, it is going to be a war. These are two very talented fronts going head to head. It's obviously going to dictate this game. The question that I have that is going to drive my prediction is, how efficient can Missouri be with their offense? Because you're going to go and face a Vanderbilt team that their identity, the way they want to dictate the football game, isn't about their physicality, isn't about Diego Pavia's heroics. It is squeezing the game. They want to squeeze the game down and limit the amount of possessions and look you dead in the eye and say, can you be more efficient than us? Vanderbilt's not going to get on third down. They're not going to have a ton of possessions, but they're going to be efficient when they do get the football. They're not going to turn the ball over, and they're going to wear on you. You're going to be on that football field for a long time because they can live with 3-4 yards every single time. Because if they do that 3 times in a row, that is a first down, and they get to do it again and again and again. So my question is when Missouri gets that football, do I believe if that becomes the game, can they win that style? because LSU couldn't do it. LSU doesn't have a consistent enough offense to do it. Alabama has a consistent enough offense to do it. Does Missouri with Bo Prabula have that? Now, we could talk about a world where Missouri kind of breaks that trend. Maybe a turnover on Pavia. Maybe they break the game open. They get a couple extra possessions so that their inefficient offense does work in their favor a little bit more. Where maybe even though they have more of an inefficient offense, they get a couple more breaks, they get a couple more possessions, and Missouri can find a way to win on the road. And that can happen. I don't deny that can happen, but at the end of the day, I'm picking Vanderbilt to win this game. I think it's far more likely that Vandy is going to be tested with their offensive line, but I'm done picking against this team. I'm done picking against Vanderbilt. Kind of like Josh Pate with Michigan. He can't seem to get on the right side of the coin with this team. I cannot get on the right side with Vanderbilt. I'm done picking against them. I'm trusting, I think Clark Lee's the better coach between him and Eli. I think I get the better quarterback in Pavia. And I think I get the more consistent offense, the more physical offensive line, and I get them at home. And Missouri's coming off of their second leg of a road trip. I like my odds. I genuinely like my odds a lot. And so I'm going to pick Vanderbilt to win. It's time for national championship updates. So, going into the season, I had Penn State and Clemson in my national championship. If I'm remembering that correctly. Wait, that was early into the spring. My official prediction, by the time we got to the summer, was Alabama and Clemson beating Alabama. Started to believe and sip the crimson Kool-Aid. Now, obviously, thank goodness I didn't pick and stick with the spring prediction, because both of those programs, one has a fired head coach and the other one is probably going to win 7 games this year if they're lucky. I'm glad I added Alabama in there. So I think with new information, it is fair to say, to get to the halfway point of the season, we're about to approach November, to make new national championship predictions. Now, is it as impressive if I were to predict it in August? No, of course not. But with the more information that I have, I think now is a good time to make this prediction. So let's look at the table. Let's look at the field and see who are the potential options that we could go with. So let's start with the national championship contenders in my eyes. Teams that I feel confident that not only they can make it to the national championship, but win it. Because there's a difference. I didn't think Notre Dame was going to win the national championship. I thought Ohio State was going to win the national championship last year. There's a difference in the talent level and the way that they can win football games. Both made it to the game. One can win it. That's how I define a national championship contender. Ohio State's the obvious pick here. Ohio State is clearly a national championship contender. I would throw Alabama in there at this point. Alabama had arguably the most impressive 4-game stretch that I could remember. 4 straight ranked games, 2 of them on the road. You beat Georgia in Athens. You beat Vanderbilt. You beat the trap game at Missouri. And then you go and win, why am I blanking? Tennessee, 3rd Saturday in October. And then Ohio State doesn't need to be explained. Number 1 team, I think everyone agrees to it. The questionable ones that I think people may push back on, that I would say borderline national championship contenders, is Miami. I understand everyone all of a sudden sold their Miami stock because of what happened against Jeff Brom in Louisville. I promise you, if you did not know about Louisville and Jeff Brom coming off of a bye, he was going to win that coaching battle. It wasn't guaranteed he was going to win the game, but that team was going to come prepared. The fact that they were double-digit dogs was ridiculous in my eyes. Made a good hefty chunk of change based on that game. I would still put them there. The talent level and the physicality that Miami has, I still think if they were in the national championship, it wouldn't shock me. It really wouldn't. I just question, do they have multiple ways to put up points? Maybe it's that rushing attack, and Mario Cristobal is my biggest concern. Indiana is right there. If you want to say Indiana should be in the national championship contenders tier, that's fine. I think that they're borderline. I just wonder, is the talent level going to be able to stack up with the top two programs that we just talked about? Oregon, I would put them in there. I understand everyone sold their stock on Oregon. How could you have Indiana and Oregon in the same tier? I really do believe Oregon and good coaches, who's going to be adding another star into that wide receiver room with Evan Stewart reportedly recovering quicker than expected. Oregon's talent level can still match up with the best of them. I would not sell your Oregon stock just because they lost to Indiana in convincing fashion at home. Weird things happen. We saw Ohio State lose to Michigan last year. Does that mean you just got to immediately sell your stock? Georgia's in there too. If we got fourth quarter Georgia every single week for 4 quarters, that is a national championship contender, but they can't put it all together. So I can't confidently put them as a national championship contender. And then I would put Texas A&M. Texas A&M can beat you in a multitude of ways. I know a lot of people are scared to say it, but Texas A&M has that upside. They're explosive. Are they a perfect team? No, but if you go look at all the teams I just talked about, Miami, Oregon, you know the drill. They all have their flaws. And hell, even Alabama, I would say, has a flaw. But the way that they're playing football and Ty Simpson, that is a national championship contender to me. And then Ohio State, what is said doesn't need to be understood or explained. I got there eventually. And then outside of that, I mean, I wouldn't say Texas Tech. I wouldn't say Georgia Tech, any of the teams, Vanderbilt. Those are all college football playoff contenders. But I'm talking about the borderline teams or ones I think could win multiple games if they were to make it to the college football playoff. Hell, if Texas figures it out. No, I'm not going down that path. I'm not going to do it. Texas needs to focus on making the college football playoff. So what's my pick? I'm keeping it simple. Based on the field and how I look at it, Ohio State, Alabama, and I think Alabama beats Ohio State. Alabama, I thought, was going to be number 2 and potentially have a hard-fought battle against the Clemson team, and the veteran roster was going to find a way to win. The way that Alabama is winning football games and the way that Ryan Grubb, Ty Simpson locked in is the only way we can really describe it. A plethora of wide receivers. If Jam Miller is healthy, that adds another layer. I think we're going to see this weekend against South Carolina that they do have an ability to run the ball when Jam Miller is playing. That offensive line continues to find ways to get better every single week. And that defense, ever since that Florida State debacle, has been playing incredible football. Now, you could make a very fair argument for Ohio State. The difference between the two, and if it was a head-to-head matchup, man, that makes me confident about Alabama is Ohio State, are we going to be 100% sure that every aspect of that team is going to be truly tested against an elite program? Because that defense, I question, has it really been tested by an elite offense? Because Texas was not an elite offense when they faced off. I don't know if they will until they get to the college football playoff, man. But I know Alabama, every part of the SEC has tested each aspect of that team, and I will know exactly what their identity is. I'll know exactly who they are, and I think that's what's going to make them so damn dangerous is they tasted their own blood in week 1, and they realized they cannot do that for the rest of the year. They now know the floor, and I don't even think they know what their ceiling is, and I think their ceiling is a national championship. So I think Alabama's going to beat Ohio State in the national championship because I think Ohio State is a damn good team. But when we're splitting hairs here, I find myself leaning towards Alabama. So I think Alabama wins. Like I said at the beginning, at the top of the show, guys, college football, year-round, 365, 52 weeks. It's the Stadium Pulse, man. This is my baby. And I would love for this to grow and continue to develop. We keep seeing the subscriber count go up. And it means the world to me. It really does. Even if it's 3 digits, man. I know we'll get to 4. I know we'll get to 5. Who knows? Maybe 6. Because I'm going to put my 110% effort into this every single week. All right. We're usually going to cut the show off here. But I got a gripe. I got a bone to pick. I think College Game Day has lost its identity. I feel like College Game Day doesn't know what it was intended to be. I feel like when we close the chapter on the picks at the beginning of this year, it was like closing the chapter on not only Coach making his retirement, felt like it was closing the chapter on what College Game Day was meant to be. Now, if you were to peruse on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, whatever it may be about College Game Day, you're going to see a couple of opinions out there. You're going to see it's only SEC and then sometimes Big Ten, which just statistically since 2023, completely fair. You're going to see complaints about Pat McAfee. And frankly, I think that is a preferential opinion. If you want the more stoic, conversational situation and type of show, I get that. But I think Pat brings a type of energy that whether or not you're a fan of him as a person, I can respect the energy added, especially after the mascot pick'em is not going to be brought back, and rightfully so. It adds a flair at the end of the day. But what I want to double click into is the selection of the locations. The selection of the locations for College Game Day was some of my favorite memories growing up as a college football fan. If you did not know, guys, I am damn near 25 years of age. I've been a college football fan for a very long time. And by every means, I think there's something that people kind of forget because they'll go look at the acquisition that ESPN made of the SEC rights and say, well, that's just the reason why they're going to a bunch of SEC games. And that's probably true. But on the flip side, what also happened in 2023? Oh, Texas and OU joined the SEC. Oh, the Big Ten jumped up to 18 teams and we dissolved an entire conference. And then the ACC is barely having a pulse outside of Miami and then Clemson last year, but they weren't even that great. And then the Big 12 is the Big 12. And the Big 12 tends to get represented by Big Noon Kickoff because they focus their time on Big 10 and Big 12. And so right now you basically have two camps of ESPN with the biggest brands in the SEC and wanting to make the best ratings possible. As unfortunate as it is, I could have told you this. This is not a shocking revelation that College Game Day was going to go down this path. College Game Day is not intended for the fans that want to go see North Dakota State and South Dakota State. That's what I lived for. That's what I want to see. They're not there to go to the Holy War, BYU and Utah. Respect the Big Noon Kickoff for going there. But this is the same problem we have with conference realignment. The same exact problem of not caring as long as it has a tiny number that is small enough versus a team that has a tiny number that's small enough. That's all that they're going to care about. And then you throw in the fact that they only want the big brands involved. Why do you think the Big Ten did what they did to dissolve the Pac-12 so that they could see Oregon versus Ohio State instead of Oregon versus Oregon State, Oregon versus, Washington State? They want to see these big brands. That's what they care about. And so when you have this conference realignment, I'm supposed to be surprised. I'm supposed to be shocked that this is the world we live in. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not trying to say, oh, I don't care. Like, why should we care? It's obvious what they're doing. No, it's fair to be frustrated about this. Going to, frankly, Missouri versus Vandy is a fair and fun story. When's the next time following this year that you're going to confidently go to Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia? I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. But you kind of already done the story. You already go to Georgia all the time. You're probably going to talk about Georgia when you go to Atlanta for the SEC championship. I just miss when College Game Day was less about the brands and the big time matchups. I mean, go look at the footage in the highlights of some of the greatest pick'ems that they've done of all time. You have Harvard in there. You have Penn in there. You have some of the more abstract venues are some of the best moments of College Game Day. Instead, I got to listen to Who's That Coming Down the Track? I'm being a hater right now. But it's frustrating, man. I really do care about the entire experience for college football. And College Game Day has lost its identity. It's lost what made it special. And frankly, I'd rather just sleep in. I'd rather just take a nap now. I would much rather than go to North Dakota State, South Dakota State, number 1, number 2 in the FCS. I'm calling a spade, man. I think it's ridiculous. But with that in mind, guys, thank you guys so much for watching the Stadium Pulse. My name is Tegan Randolph, your host, and we will always be talking college football on this channel. And with that in mind, I appreciate everyone for taking a moment to watch today's show. Leave a like, leave a sub. Go check out the other channels linked on this channel and on this page. And I will see you guys on Sunday.
Try to